What's going on, y'all? It's your man Sapreme, and welcome back to the Real Rap Show. And this is episode 73 of the Real Rap Show, the most dangerous man in Harlem, the story of Red Dillard Morrison. Now, before we get this episode started, I want to say thank you to everybody that has been tuning in to the Real Rap Show since day one, everyone in the comments, and also everyone that gives me great feedback about the show. Follow me on Instagram at Dre with the camera and at It's the Real Rap Show. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so y'all can stay notified whenever I drop a new episode of the Real Rap Show. Now let's get this started. Dillard Morrison was born in Alabama in 1919. In public school, Dillard stayed in trouble. He didn't like bullies, and when he would see other students getting taken advantage of, he would step in and challenge the bullies to a fight. Dillard would do the bullies dirty and send a message to all the tough kids in school. After beating up all the so-called bullies, Dillard became famous, and all the kids in school admired him for protecting them. The teachers didn't like bullies, but even they was kind of proud that Dillard had stopped the bullying. When Dillard turned 18 in 1937, he was living with family. Dillard's mother had left Alabama a few years before to live in New York. Now, at this time, Dillard was in South Carolina. He got the nickname Red when he once tried to straighten his hair and it turned red. Around this time in the South, a lot of young men had perms in their hair, or back then, the hairstyle was called processed. In 1937, Dillard moved to Harlem, New York to live with his mother. Now, when Dillard arrived in Harlem, automatically he seen how real shit was. Harlem was action-packed. The blocks and corners were busy with young dudes and older men, and everybody was hustling something. Dillard had to rely on doing odd jobs around the neighborhood to make money and to help his mother. Once Dillard learned the neighborhood, he met other young guys that was into shooting dice and hanging around bars and gambling spots. That was very popular around that time. Also, the 1930s in Harlem was a place for rising poets, jazz musicians, singers, and actors. You had writers like Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston. You had musicians like Duke Ellington and Bessie Smith. There were also activists like A. Philip Randolph and Marcus Garvey. Everybody liked Dillard, and they respected him and knew he would stand up to anyone. But Dillard wanted to get money. He wanted to get it the same way everybody else was getting it, and that was by any means. So he began robbing crap games. There were dudes that were number runners, and Dillard knew all about the number runners. He knew at a certain time of the day they would have a lot of money on them, so he started robbing and beating up all the number runners in the neighborhood. The word got around town real fast that Dillard was out there robbing and beating up all the number runners, and niggas was scared to death of Dillard. Nobody wanted static with him. A lot of the older shot callers began to hear Dillard's name in the street and wanted someone like him on their team. Dillard wanted to step his game up in the streets of Harlem and pulled off a heist at a Woolworth store, but only got away with a few dollars. He was so upset, he turned around and robbed a check cashing place right after and got away. One day, one of the number runners that Dillard robbed a while back was with another dude that had a gun, and they were walking around hoping to run into Dillard. After a while of walking around, the two spotted Dillard and ran up on him and jumped on him. The dude with the gun shot Dillard in the leg to get Dillard off the number runner. The two dudes were so scared of Dillard, they ran and Dillard chased the two dudes all the way back to their getaway car, but the dudes escaped. Now, two of the biggest shot callers in Harlem was trying to get in touch with Dillard. There was a woman named May who had crews of shoplifters boosting from all the stores in New York City. She wanted Dillard down with her. And then there was Joe Richards, known as Big Joe, and he was the boss of the Seaboard Negro Rackets. He also wanted Dillard to be down with him as well. There was a popular bar on 7th Avenue in Harlem where all the hustlers and bosses hung out at, and Dillard could always be found there. Big Joe saw Dillard come inside the bar one night and he asked Dillard to be his right hand man. Dillard knew how powerful Big Joe was, so he took the offer. Big Joe then handed Dillard some money as an advance. Everything was going good. Red was making money now, and now that he was Big Joe's muscle, people in Harlem feared him even more. He had a reputation for beating dudes up real bad, and on April 29th in 1940, he was arrested for third-degree assault. But Red had beat the dude up so bad that the dude refused to testify, and the charge against Red was dropped and he was released. Red was arrested again in May of 1940 and in June of 1940 on third-degree assault charges. Both of these charges were thrown out again, and Red was let go after the victims once again refused to testify. Now, during Red's time being at that bar on 7th Avenue, he became friends with people like Count Basie, Miles Davis, Billy Eckstein, and Sarah Vaughan, to name a few. Now, I forgot to mention that in 1938, Red met a girl named Kathleen. The same year, he proposed to her at the Savoy Ballroom that was located at 596 Lenox Avenue between 140th and 141st Street in Harlem. Now, the Savoy was all about dancing. They had a no discrimination policy, so as long as you could dance real good, you were good at the Savoy. It was a real popular place back then. Clark Gable would often be found there. Also, in 1946, Dizzy Gillespie played there. You got any good memories about the Savoy? Any good stories? Let me know in the comments. Now back to the story. In 1941, Red and Kathleen had a child and named him Dillard Morrison Jr. Around this time, Red was catching a lot of cases for assault, and Big Joe didn't want that kind of heat. So Red and Big Joe stopped doing business in around 1946 or 1947. Also, around this time, a lot of dudes started switching over to the dope game. But while he was working for Big Joe, Red had met a lot of connected people. He had met guys that worked for the boss of the Genovese crime family, and that guy was mobster Lucky Luciano, who was now the biggest name in the dope game. Lucky was getting his dope from Turkey, and it was the best product you could get your hands on. Red got back in touch with the guys from the Genovese crime family, and they put him directly in contact with Lucky Luciano. Red started buying bricks and having the bricks broken down and sold in the streets of Harlem, the Bronx, and Brooklyn. That's when the real money started coming in, and the women started flocking around Red to a degree. Red started pimping the women, making even more money. He started throwing lavish parties to celebrate his success. The biggest names in Harlem would attend Red's parties. Then the newspaper started doing stories on Red Dillard for his luxurious parties and all of his criminal activities. Now, the amount of times that Red had run-ins with the police is ridiculous. On October 6, 1943, Red was arrested for armed robbery. That case was dismissed. On July 24, 1944, he served 6 months in jail in North Bergen, New Jersey for possession of narcotics. On July 22, 1945, he was arrested for assault. That case was dismissed. On March 31, 1946, Red had to pay a fine for shooting dice. On October 5, 1946, Red was arrested for driving with a revoked license and had to pay a fine. He was 26 years old. On April 29, 1946, Red was arrested for assault. That case was dismissed. On November 18, 1946, Red was arrested for gambling and had to pay a $100 fine. On January 18, 1947, Red was arrested for grand larceny. That case was dismissed. On April 11, 1947, Red was arrested for pimping, and that case was dismissed. On December 3, 1947, he was arrested and given 20 days in jail for reckless driving. On December 21, 1946, he was arrested again and released on bail for being caught with a knife. On April 10, 1949, Red went to Shep's Bar and Grill on 146th Street and let off shots through the door and shot the windows out the spot. The people inside told the police that Red did it. He was arrested for that, but released. Now, Red was still moving a lot of dope. There was a lot of people that was selling for Red. Some of the women that was working for him was also selling his dope to their clients. And what was scary about that was the women were basically selling to anybody that they slept with, not knowing if they were undercover cops or not. But these women was real loyal to Red. One time he got arrested for pimping, and when he went before the judge, the case got dismissed. So when Red turned to exit the courtroom, 15 women that were sitting in the audience all got up at the same time and walked out with him. The court could not believe what they were seeing. Red had another case he was fighting with a dude named Lewis Taylor and Bumpy Johnson where somebody got stabbed. Red ended up being held on $2,500 bail. Red had one of his women post the bail and he was released. Now, like I said before, a lot of dudes was moving into the dope game in Harlem. There was another dude that I just mentioned that was kinda doing the same shit as Red, and that person was Harlem's Bumpy Johnson. Bumpy Johnson's record was just as wild as Red's was, and just like Red, Bumpy got his start working as an enforcer. He was an enforcer for Madam Stephanie St. Clair. She was a number running queen in Harlem. Check out the story I did on Stephanie St. Clair on my series, Infamous Women. But Bumpy Johnson was also one of the major players in Harlem that was now getting involved with the dope game. And he was violent just like Red was, and Bumpy Johnson stayed in trouble with the police. So I can see how Bumpy and Red ended up being co-defendants in a case where somebody got seriously hurt. The police couldn't get any real charges to stick to Red. They knew he had a major drug operation in Harlem, so they hired a special agent to go undercover and work the blocks to find out about Red's drug operation. And it wasn't long before they got lucky, because the people in Harlem simply spoke too much. Not to the cops, but on the street, there were people openly talking about who was doing what. On May 4th, 1950, feds arrested Red and two other people on possession and sale of narcotic charges. The feds saw Red deliver a half an ounce to a dude named Gator, and during the transaction, Red, Gator, and a white lady was arrested. Red was sentenced to 5 years in prison. In 1955, he was released. He came home paralyzed after a fight in jail. While Red was in prison, Sarah Vaughan came to Otisville and performed for Red. Now, I'm not sure what went down in prison that paralyzed Red. He was always known as a good fighter. So if anybody out there got more info on how it happened and who did it, tear the comment section up. A few days after Red came home, two guys from the Genovese crime family came to Red's house in Harlem and gave him the keys to a 1955 Cadillac Eldorado for not snitching on Lucky Luciano. Red told the men he didn't need the car because they didn't know he was paralyzed until they got there. But instead, Red told them he wanted to open up a dry cleaners, so they took the car back and gave Red some money. A few months later, Red's wife Kathleen died from an allergic reaction to a penicillin shot she had gotten. After Kathleen died, Red began drinking a lot and going to clubs like Birdland. There was another club called Shalimar that Red would go to and sit at the bar for hours getting wasted. In 1957 or 1958, Red opened up his own nightclub called Red's After Hour Spot on 146th Street. Now, I couldn't find any photos of Red's After Hour Spot, but get in the comments and let me know, when did Red's After Hour Spot close down and why? And also, what is it now? While Red owned the club, on top of him being an alcoholic, he got addicted to that powder, and Red ended up setting up a drug deal with a federal agent and got busted. This time, they sent Red to prison for 10 years, and again, Red would get visits from Billy Eckstein, Sarah Vaughan, and more. Red was released in 1974. He was 59 years old and decided he was done with Harlem and moved to LA. Red began selling drugs again to make money. He started dating a woman who was on drugs, but it wasn't long before their relationship went sour because she ended up calling the police on Red, telling them he was a drug dealer and even told them where to find the drugs. It was 1979, And yep, Red was arrested again and sent back to prison on drug charges. In 1989, Dillard Red Morrison died in prison from bladder cancer. He was 70 years old. Now hit the like button, because when you hear stories like this, it makes you wonder why none of these kind of people took some of that money they were making and invested it into something that we still see today. A lot of big companies were started in the times of Red Dillard and many more. Some of the big companies and brands we see today were built on illegal activities. So I need y'all to answer this. Name one African American person from Red's era or after that took street money and built it into a brand that we still see today. People like Stephanie St. Clair, Bumpy Johnson, Big Joe, the shoplifting godmother May, and I'm pretty sure there's a list of other street famous people that were rich off illegal activities that we never heard about. And when these people died, some of them left large amounts of cash behind. What happened to that money? Are there any legends that you think need their story told on The Real Rap Show? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. It's your man Sapreme, and you were just tuned into another episode of The Real Rap Show, and this was episode 73 of The Real Rap Show. The feds called him the most dangerous man in Harlem. The story of Red Dillard Morrison. Give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so y'all can stay notified whenever I drop a new episode of The Real Rap Show. Now y'all stay safe out there. Real rap.